Welcome to the New Wealth Wave podcast hosted by Dr. Joaquin Wallace. We're diving deep into the intricate layers of the 7-stage generational wealth model to offer invaluable insights on legacy building, wealth accumulation and preservation, and financial growth across generations. I'm Dr. Joaquin Wallace, and this is the New Wealth Wave podcast. Greetings, future wealth builders. You're tuned into the New Wealth Wave podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Joaquin Wallace. Our episode today will delve into stage 4 of the generational wealth model. Accompanying me to discuss this critical stage is Jasper Smith. True to our format, each guest on our podcast sheds light on a specific stage. Jasper stands out in this realm with his impactful work in communities and businesses. So a quick bio on Jasper. Jasper's known as Mr. Build Wealth, hashtag is silent, has been involved in the financial services space for over 15 years. He's the chief visionary behind a financial education company called the hashtag silent Build Wealth movement. He works tirelessly to disrupt generational poverty for everyone so their kids can live a life of privilege. So Jasper, a quick brief introduction about yourself. So for our listeners who need to become more familiar with your work, what would you like our listeners to learn more about you?
I want them to know a lot about me, doctor. But really for today's conversation, just know that I care about seeing people do well financially. I've made it my life's work. And it's really just, I'm doing what I can to change the way people think and feel about money at its core. But that involves a lot more than just those two simple things. But I ran into some things earlier in my life or career that just didn't sit well with me. And I figured if I could learn some things and share it with my community, why not? There's so many things that we aren't told and information that doesn't get down to certain areas in this country or the world. And I just looked at it as kind of a challenge. Well, if I can do this and learn, why can't I tell like a family member, a friend, and watch all of us grow together, like grow wealthy, get rich? Like we can do it as a collective if we knew the information. And so I became really like you can call me a finance nerd. I was just obsessed with how does money work? Learning and reading more about capitalism and learning about all these things that certain communities just don't talk about ever until we have to. And so I think for me, it was just taking that kind of natural curiosity and figuring out how can I apply what I'm learning to my own family situation, but also how I can impact other families that I talk with and speak with on a regular basis.
Well, you talked about the fact that, money is not a conversation that is held in the home, especially in marginalized communities, within the generational wealth model, which we'll get to later on. One of my theories is that we just don't talk about money, like you mentioned earlier, our internal and external ecosystem. But before we get to the heavy lifting of the podcast itself, I always start with, tell us a fun fact about yourself that no one would know about you. Your listeners can learn as well.
Yeah. One thing that I don't think a lot of people know is that I'm an avid platelet donor at the American Red Cross. Like I literally go every couple of weeks. I've been donating now for a little over 13 years. And so I literally say I've probably helped save a lot of lives. And I'm also probably, it's weird to say, I'm inside of a lot of people. My platelets have a very short shelf life. And so they are shipped off to hospitals immediately after I give a donation. And so I literally have saved probably thousands of lives of people that I will never get to meet. And I always share that fun fact. It's a way of like me sharing with the world that because I am healthy, I know that others aren't as fortunate. And so it's my way of I like to say it's paying my rent for living here on earth.
That's outstanding. I always talk about, leaving your footprints, and that's definitely leaving footprints rather than financial, but you're doing it in a more holistic fashion as well. A fun story though, you and I was following each other on LinkedIn for years. Never knew that. And one particular day, we both are advisors for a particular company. I'm at work and you're at work. And I just happened to stop in this particular day. I think it was coming right after the pandemic. I can't believe it was 2020 or 2021. And we're standing talking at the desk. And I'm looking at you and you're looking at me. And I said to myself, I know this guy from somewhere. I just said, hey, don't I know you from somewhere? And you said, yeah, man, we follow each other on LinkedIn. My name is Jasper. I said, "Oh my God, you are Jasper, right?" You follow so many people on social media. You don't get a chance to see them in person, but you're standing literally right by me, right? And we've done the same thing for several years. And lo and behold, here we are today. I think that was like 3 or 4 years later.
All facts. I was like, oh my God, there he is. And here we are today.
Here we are today. I mean, that is so amazing. So, if you're following our podcast on YouTube, you can view the model. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, feel free to click on the link of the description to download the model to follow along. And if this is your first time tuning into the New Wealth Way podcast, tune into our previous episodes as well. Tons of great information, which leads up to this particular stage of the model itself. So, today we are focusing on stage 4 of the generational wealth model, which is centered on financial edification. Now, again, the model is 7 stages. Stage 1 is your internal and external ecosystem. Stage 2 is your financial genetic code, which spawns off into 2 areas, which is financial literacy and financial trauma. Stage 3 is the healing progress, reprogramming your financial genetic code. Stage 4 is financial edification, which spawns into 2 areas, financial literacy and financial inclusion, which Jasper will speak about today. I'm going to give you my definition of financial edification as well. Stage 5 is financial well-being. Stage 6 is generational knowledge, creating your financial footprints to stage 7, which is creating generational wealth, because we all know generational wealth begins with generational knowledge. Financial edification is the advanced education in financial principles and practices, extending beyond basic literacy. I do believe that financial literacy is not linear, it's organic, and Jasper's going to help me with that as well. It's more than just saving, investing, and budgeting and understanding your credit. All of those are important, but that's not the final analysis. It's a small piece in the puzzle. It aims to deepen understanding and application of financial concepts, fostering informed decision-making and a mindset for sound financial behavior, ultimately enhancing financial well-being, which is stage 5 of the model, and security, which is stage 1, which is internal and external ecosystem. Jasper, before we go forward, what do you think about that definition?
And that's heavy. It's a heavy definition, but I love it because it's thorough. I mean, we know this is just one stage of the entire model, but you spot on, man. It's a lot to unpack. I mean, this whole model, it is a lot, but I love just how thorough you explain that, because when people see certain words, they're like, what does that really mean? I think you did a great job of giving them the full definition. Like, here's what it is. Let's take Dr. Wallace and his definition and let's plaster that everywhere so people really know what edification means from a financial standpoint.
And that's so important because, again, we talked about it before. I mean, we've been talking for close to a year, right, about philosophy in regards to what the narratives out there in regards to generational wealth and financial inclusion. And so when I created the model, I wanted to provide an opportunity to give someone the GPS, the steps to look at to get to generational wealth. We all know that generational wealth can't happen overnight. That's one thing that we do know. And so it's steps that is involved in this process. So the 7 steps itself kind of touches on each one of those stages. So you had a chance to review the model. What is your first impressions?
I love the flow. I think things are in proper order. So as you take people around the model itself, it just feels like we know we could be in any one of these stages on any given day. But also as you've gone through life, depending on your age, do you find yourself stuck? And so I looked at, well, okay, where was I? Where was my family? Like, it just made me start to think. It forces you to think and kind of look internal. Like, what am I doing? Where do I fall in this model? Where does my family, my community? And what it did for me was it made me want to ask my elders more questions. Like, people in my family, like, I got some questions because I need to understand, and this is a personal thing, is that curiosity. Like, why aren't more families wealthy or living an abundant life? And I think this model helps to kind of pull out some of those pieces of, well, did you skip this step? Well, so that's probably why you're in this situation. Or have you not had the conversation? Have you not thought about it's a step-by-step process, like a newborn child, got to crawl, then you walk, then you run. And I think for a lot of us, we are looking for the quick fix, we want all the success without doing the work. And this model shows where there's some work that has to get done if you want to be financially successful. And the model just kind of walks you through. Let's just start here, stage 1. How we doing? Stage 2. Okay. Oh, we had a life event. What happened to us? Did we fall off the wagon? Did we get back on? And so a lot of us are sometimes needing that guide. And I think this model does a great job of just, hey, where are you? And you got to be honest with yourself. I think that's another piece. Well, some people will lie. No, lying doesn't help you in this process. Being honest and truthful and transparent is what will help you get through it, no matter where you are on that journey.
That's an interesting point because when I created the model again, it was a byproduct of me internally looking at myself, being transparent with myself. But, as an advisor, as a planner, I've had an opportunity of meeting with hundreds of clients. And it was a common denominator consistently coming out of those conversations. One was, if I knew what I knew today, I would be in a different position. And
Mhm.
two, a lot of our clients was holding on to baggage that happened in stage one in terms of the internal and external ecosystem. So when they get to stage five in their eyes of financial well-being, now they're asking, okay, why am I not able to put myself in a position to have a soft landing in retirement? When we came up with the model itself, it's like, this is the areas that I wanted to kind of uncover. So based on what you mentioned earlier, where do you find yourself in the model today?
My immediate family, my wife, myself, my daughter, definitely at stage 4. And it's more from I'll say from an inclusion standpoint. Like I want to be included in all the things that wealthy people do. And we're not there yet, which also ties into like financial literacy. I have to understand why am I so obsessed? It's because I keep reading and doing research about what wealthy families have done. And so I too am a work in progress and I'm continuing to learn strategies that are going to get me through this entire model. And so I then looked at my parents, them being in retirement, they're probably stage 6 easily. I mean, they're figuring out like, what's the next wave for how do we take care of our grandkids? I mean, they've skipped over. I'm the youngest of 3. They're like, screw y'all. It's about these grandbabies. So looking at them and knowing that they've gotten through this and they still have, it was a stage 2 where you talk about the trauma. Lord knows everybody's got it. But somehow, some way they've been able to get through the entire model. And they're now in that last stage of, we just got to ride this thing out and make sure that when we hand over the keys to this car, the car is in decent shape.
And that's a great way of putting it. So, what stages are you implementing to build your generational wealth today?
It's kind of twofold for me is having that discussion with my parents and probably more so my father, more so than my mom, just because of her, I guess you could say financial trauma and or anxiety. It's sometimes challenging for her to have that discussion, but, thankful that my dad is there to kind of help nudge her through this process. And so, in having discussions with him is learning like what it takes or what they did when they were my age with a young family versus now being older and all your kids being grown. So just talking through and listening, like opening up both ears and just asking the simple questions to allow them to just talk because there's so much gold in listening to somebody who's already been there. It's not necessarily going to be your exact journey, but you can kind of pick out some pieces of like, oh, I haven't done that. Oh, that's why I messed that up. Oh, we should probably think about this. And it's listening to, other family members and elders of like, just how'd you figure it out? Like, what were your concerns when you were my age and had this situation? And a lot of them have some incredible advice. And they're like, consider this. They never tell me what I should do because you're a grown person. They're like, I would suggest, or have you considered, have you thought about? And it's the way they've challenged me by asking those questions is like, okay, I think I too can also get through this if I ask those questions and I can get to stage 7, no problem. Now, on the flip side, from a standpoint of like my immediate, like my family, it stems from the work that my wife and I have done with my daughter. So she's a little over 1.5, and we've set her up with a whole bunch of accounts, the bank account, an investment account, life insurance. We've looked at the authorized user model for credit. And it's just things that I've had clients share with me struggles they've had in life. And I always ask the question of, what if somebody helped you with a head start? How would your life have been different? And so now I think about my daughter and I'm like, oh, she's getting exposed to this early. Like she doesn't understand it just yet. But when she is ready, she's going to get a great lesson in why she has these accounts. And I apply to your model too of like, we got some stuff we got to deal with. And your family and friends might not be aware of where they are on this model, but here's where you are. And just bringing her into the fold as soon as she can understand these concepts, baby girl is going to be okay. And I think we'll have some more kids. So if every kid that I'm able to produce is going to have a basic framework or understanding of the language of money, which I know will lead us to this promised land of generational wealth or talk about disrupting generational poverty. So it's all these things that if I just got her started early, how will her life be different than mine?
So I'm gonna ask you a question. You and your wife has been married for how many years now?
A little over 2 years.
A little over 2 years. Okay. So my theory is that you have two people coming into a relationship and they have two different internal and external ecosystems. They come into a relationship and they go through the model itself. So internal, external ecosystem, stage 2, and stage 3. Now, you mentioned earlier that how conversations in regards to finance is not had in the home. It's a taboo subject. Now, being in a position that you have been able to kind of jumpstart that, kind of went around those issues, if you will. How did you and your wife kind of talk about money? Because that's a very difficult conversation to have because both of you come from a different set of internal and external ecosystems. What did you do that you can share to our listeners that can help couples like yourself to kind of help navigate through the stages 4, 5, and 6? Because as you know, if that is not on point, it's virtually impossible to get to stage 5, which is financial well-being, for the both of you to have a soft landing. Kind of talk about that. I'm interested to hear that part.
I told her when we first started dating. So this was before marriage. It was just, here's who I am. Here's my family. Here's how I was raised. I was that transparent with her. I wasn't always doing that with previous women that I dated, but I was like, this might be the one. So let me share a little bit more about the life that I see myself living and with whomever my partner will be. And my wife was not afraid to have the discussion. That was the difference. Like, she just wasn't afraid. She was like, great. And here's how I feel. And so it was a discussion. And as we dated, we just had financial challenges. Who's paying for this meal? Who's paying for this flight? And so it was all these little things you're like, somebody got to pay. And how are we going to deal with this as we go through dating and to marriage and having children? And anytime we ran into an issue, we had the discussion right then and there. Like, we didn't let it just prolong. Well, we'll get to it. No. I need to get this issue addressed so I can move on. And I can't have things lingering because all it's going to do is cause a blow up later on. And so we were able to pretty much avoid a lot of those blow ups. As what happens to most couples is because I brought it into the discussion early in our relationship, and I haven't changed. It was just, if we constantly talk about this, we can get through anything together. Anything. Like, life is going to throw a lot at us. But if we are openly having this discussion, and I'll say the frequency will be dependent on the person and the couple. Ours just happens to be quarterly. Unless life throws something at us, we address it right then and there. But at least quarterly, we started talking about it. And I shared with my wife that I did my personal stuff every quarter, and she didn't come on board right away. So it took about maybe a year and a half or two for her to start joining me in this quarterly checkup. And now it got to the point where she threw the calendar invite on our shared calendar every quarter. We got to have our money meeting. And I was like, oh, you excited? That wasn't happening when we first started talking. And so she began to understand why this was so important, not only to just us, but just in general. This is why a lot of couples struggle, because they don't communicate in general, but definitely not communicating enough about money. And I said, it's touching everything that we do. So we'd be foolish not to have this discussion regularly. And if there's anything else that comes up, just know you can always talk to me about this. You never have to wait. We don't need a therapist. You can just ask me directly. I got something that's on my mind that bothered me. And I just got lucky, man, that she was willing to go through that initial process with me, because now it's just second nature. Like, we can just bring up a money, like we did this morning. I was like, oh, look at that account. Done. You're talking a 5-minute conversation because she's like, no pushback here. We got to get this done for the sake of the family. Let's work.
And that's outstanding. I mean, I hope the listeners that are out there take notes, because that is an important piece in the process in regards to having a successful marriage, because there's really no statistics to it, but I firmly believe 60 to 70% of all marriages that do go through some sort of divorce or separation is a byproduct of some sort of financial issues, trauma, anxiety, both financial genetic codes, again, because they're bringing in baggage from their internal and external ecosystem. So with that being said, you do a lot of counseling. You do free things as well. You had something at a restaurant a few months back. Where do you most see your clients on the generational wealth model?
I find a lot of stage 1 and 2. And stage 1 from the standpoint of the outside influences, the pressures of society and life, like, it weighs on people. I mean, you can see it. I mean, as soon as the meeting starts, you're like, we're going to have a talk today, and I need you to tell me where it hurts. And you can just see they've been waiting to just get some of this off their chest. And that's what's preventing them to just moving forward. And it's like, let's unpack it. Let's just talk through it. And so that delves into stage 2, where there is that anxiety or the trauma from, I've only seen life in this one lens. I don't know another way of life. And that scares the crap out of people. Like they don't even see the light at the end of the tunnel because, well, I was told we don't talk about this, or no one in my family has ever done this, or I'm the first in my family to do this. So I'm just kind of, I don't even know what I'm doing. And you can see how that just weighs on people, but they've never really taken the time to unpack it. And honestly, if I can get them past the first two stages, my job is pretty easy. Like the numbers, the accounts, the solutions we talk about as advisors and planners, that's the easiest part of what we do as practitioners. It's those first two stages that are the headache. It's why the people reschedule meetings. It's why we get the no-shows. It's, oh, I'm too busy. You can smell the fear. They just don't want to talk about that anxiety, that trauma, that, I'm trying to keep up with my neighbor and my friends. You don't know what they're doing. So we're trying to keep up with people and we don't know where they are on the model. So y'all could be doing something you see that could be totally not in your best interest, completely out of this track you should be on. Well, you don't even know if you're on track. That's the first thing. But I find a lot, if we can get through stages 1 and 2, we can get cooking. But it's those first 2 stages, and I can sense it. And I'm just like, whew. And as a practitioner, I know that I cannot skip and just start talking about, here's what you should do with your money. Nope, just ask that question. If we resolve this issue, how would that make you feel? And when you ask that feeling question, you might as well just sit back and start taking notes. And I'm like, and I got to the root cause of the issue as to why they overspend every month. Because that's all they saw. They don't know how to not spend money every month. You don't have to buy that. You don't have to pay for those gifts. There's a lot of things you don't have to do. You just don't know another way of living. So we gotta do some rewiring. But it honestly, man, those first 2 stages is where I found the bulk of people.
And that's why that stage 3 as practitioners, as we are, reprogramming your financial genetic code is so important because, again, you have a lot of missed meetings, a lot of excuses, analysis by paralysis. One thing that I constantly speak about is that we're taught in terms of the external model, we're taught that rich is where we want to be. We have songs about it, get rich, die trying, right? I mean, so many songs are about us becoming rich. My theory basically is rich is transactional, wealth is a legacy. And so it's up to us to try to change that mindset in regards to reprogramming that financial genetic code, which is stage 3. That's the healing part. That's where you and I come in. And that's where other practitioners like ourselves, this is why we bring so much to the table. Now, with that being said, stage 4, that's your expertise. The financial edification, as we mentioned earlier, literacy and inclusion. The question I have for you is, what does financial inclusion signify to you?
I'm included now in these discussions. I'm included in the information and educate. Like I'm just, there's nothing that's being withheld is what I think of. So now you've got the entire list. Let's say it's a list of what it will take to be wealthy, to live a more prosperous financial life. Like, I hate when people say, I didn't know, or they didn't tell me, or they're trying to keep this from me. And I think with the advancements in technology, a lot of people have been included in even just the investment conversation. I mean, the pandemic, a lot of people had never invested until the pandemic. And why? Because now in the palm of your hand, you could open up an account and press a button and place a trade for a stock. You usually had to go through somebody like myself or you, Dr. Wallace. Well, now you don't necessarily need us to do the transaction, but do you know what you're doing on that app? I just looked at a lot of the wealth gap data and a lot of research, and it was always around, well, we didn't know this information. The information wasn't given to us. And so there was always these feelings of exclusion. Technology kind of helped us to get to this point in life where if you don't feel included, I don't know if it's all society's problem anymore, because now we have access to so much stuff. In some regards, it's too much, but you can be included now. But will you go on the journey and do what's necessary on your own? And for a lot of people, because of that fear and the anxiety and the trauma, they're not. So although the technology is there and it's readily available, we still don't use it. It's like if you're hungry and a sandwich is outside your door, you're like, man, I'm so hungry. Open the door, grab a sandwich. Like, that's what I feel about like the financial literacy component and the inclusivity is it's right there. Like, we're not hiding. Like, we're having a talk right now about how to make it. We started with your model of what's going on inside that head of yours. What's going on inside in front of your heart? Like, how do we think and feel about these things? Because sometimes we're excluding our own selves when the information and the resources are right in front of us.
Excellent point. One of the things I mentioned about the model itself is that it's not race-based, right? Because every ethnicity is on the model itself. So it's not specifically towards a specific race. And that makes it more inclusive because every race can step on the model and say, I'm here, I'm stage 1, I'm at stage 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm trying to get to stage 6. which is basically transferring, creating your financial footprints to stage 7. But we're on stage 4 of the model. How important is financial literacy in the work you do?
Top of the list. Top of the list. I have to make sure you understand the basics. And when I think of literacy, we always think of like reading, right? We think, are you able to read at a certain level? We go through our formal education system of, are you reading at this level and this grade level? And this, in that regard, it was a process. You learned your alphabet. You learned the sounds, like you did your phonics work. And then you slowly started putting sentences together. And you built it up to where now you can put a sentence together, no problem. Financial, kind of got to some of that same work. Let's start with the most basic step and make sure you understand that piece before we go on to the next step. It's hard because of technology and marketing, and we live in a consumption environment. So we're always things are just being thrown at us and we don't know how to decipher them. Like, how do I make sense of all this information that's being thrown my way? Well, if we have this basic financial literacy foundation, you will know what's legit and what isn't. Or you'd be able to think of, well, that sounds good, but it's not in my best interest to pursue it. I mean, the example I give of being financially literate is I go back to the pandemic and cryptocurrency. I literally was trying to help people who I knew needed kind of the foundational work. And they would say to me, what you think about crypto? I want to do some crypto investing. I'm like, okay, so pause. You're not going to talk to me about your budget, your credit. I got to know the foundation is built. And you want to just hop over everything and talk about crypto. All right. That was a couple years ago. I don't know how those people are doing today because I never talked to them again. And all I said was, I don't think you're in the right frame of mind. I believe what you need is to begin like at the first step. And if and when we are ready to discuss investing, we will then decide as a collective, right? We're a team. I'm your money guy. But let's talk through the other stuff. And if crypto is an option that we are going to pursue, let's do it at that point. People not trying to hear that. It's hot. It's sexy. Get me in that. Nope. Can't do it.
And that goes back to stage 1, as I mentioned earlier. Externally, we're taught that we want to become rich, and rich is transactional, right? So we want what's happening right now, what's hot. And so we're going to delve into that. As you mentioned, have no idea of the other components to what it takes to even get into crypto and things of that nature. Now, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. You're an author. You wrote a book as well, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to talk about that. But let's talk about your LinkedIn. You have a LinkedIn course as well that talks about stage 4, basically financial literacy and inclusion. It ties right into it. So kind of talk about your LinkedIn course that you have, which kind of speaks on stage 4.
I guess I was in the right place at the right time, doing what I was supposed to do, and was tapped to do an opportunity with doing a course. And it was really around what do I give to people that would be valuable right now? Like, not all this highfalutin stuff that I've learned, that you've learned, taking all these tests. Nobody cares about that stuff. We need like basic everyday help. Like, how do we make everyday like personal finance decisions? It's in those decisions that help or hurt us moving forward on this journey to generational wealth or financial freedom or financial independence. And so part of that course was, let me give you just enough to get you started. It's not going to do everything, but let me give you enough to where if you get these concepts down, you're doing all right. And if you're not doing the steps that I lay out in that course, and I even provide a checklist when you complete the course, and the checklist is there to help guide you, because you may never call me to work with me as an advisor. That's okay. But at least you now have a blueprint or a checklist to say, look, if I haven't checked these items off, that's a problem. It is that simple. If you skip a step, I'm just going to ask you why you felt compelled to skip the step, because it will mess up the whole process. It was so fun to do because it will live long after I'm gone. So 100 years from now, if somebody logged onto LinkedIn and searched me and found my course, I think it's Personal Finance for Everyday Decision Making is the name. It's legit. That's what's crazy about that piece of content, is that whoever decides to pick it up, no matter where they are on their journey, will get some value out of that course. That's why that course was so impactful, or continues to be impactful.
So you talk about the course in LinkedIn. So now let's transition to the book. Talk to us about the book.
So the book was partly, I'll be honest, I was frustrated because I was watching a lot of financial, I guess you can call them influencers today, right? There's a lot of financial gurus, and every guru had a book. You had to have a book, and I did. And I was just mad. I had been in the industry at that point 10 years, and I'm like, I got a decade's worth of experiences, stories, knowledge, and nobody knows what's going on in my head in terms of how I help my clients and help my community. So part of the book came from, it was a survey that I would give to people prior to doing a coaching or a consulting session, because I just wanted a little bit of information about where you were on your journey. And so the 8 challenge questions that I pose in the book, I just want people to answer them. That's all I wanted to do. And then I provide a little bit of detail as to why each one of those questions and understanding where they, like where you fall on the continuum. It is important. And what I would ask people to do is, if you ever grab a copy of the book, it's called the Build Wealth Challenge on Purpose. And it's these 8 questions to change the way you think and feel about money. So I'm challenging you. It's almost like a personal challenge in a sense. If you open the book, just answer the questions. You don't have to read the book is a short read. Maybe you just answer the first question and just say, I need to start right here. Question number 1. And if you start feeling uneasy, there's no need to add on to the stress pile. Just stop right there and say, okay, that first question has already rubbed me the wrong way. How do I relieve some of that tension that I felt by answering that question? That's where you should start with your planning. And that's literally what I was trying to find out. Even to this day, I'm just trying to figure out, what role can I play on what I call the money team? I may play a very minor role or a major role or somewhere in between. But if somebody can tell me honestly where they are, I probably will be able to figure out, 1, if I can help, and 2, what level of service they will actually need or require from somebody like me, or me personally, if they so choose to add me as a member of their money team. And so that book was just, I was mad I didn't have one. And then I said, I keep asking people these 8 questions before a meeting that helps me to have a fruitful meeting. There's my book. It actually took me maybe 2 months to actually write the book, because it was all in my head. It was a matter of me just getting it on paper and getting it done. And so that book has become a big piece of my gift also to the world of, if you ever pick this book up 100 years from now, those questions are still relevant. So it's timeless, it's evergreen. And that's what I've learned, that a lot of the content that I love to produce, it's not flashy. It's not, I'm here today, gone tomorrow. It's just things that, if we can get these things down, it's kind of like your model. Just, if we just go through the model, we're going to be okay. If you go through the book, you're going to be okay. At some point, it was one of those on my to-do list or my bucket list, and I got it done fairly early in my life. And I have some other books that I also would love to publish, but it just meant the world to me that I did it. And I can say forever in life, I'm an author.
And that's important, because you talk about the evergreen opportunity with the book itself. And that was one of the ideas that spawned me into creating the model, leaving financial footprints, or leaving footprints, if you will. This model, once it's published and used in the book format, because I'm working on the book as well, it's something that's going to be around forever. I firmly believe that individuals can use this model when they're meeting with their clients. I think it's going to help them have more of a seamless process in understanding the client itself, because we know that oftentimes we think we know the client, but we really don't know the client. But the model will allow the client to be transparent as well, because as you know, as practitioners in the business, if they're not transparent, it's virtually impossible for us to help them. I mean, it is what it is. And so I think this is a way that, that you can use it, you can apply it, you can take pieces of the model and put it in an investment proposal, you can put an IPS, or you can actually put it into an actual investment strategy. You can go to stages, as we know, the accumulation stage, preservation, and the capital appreciation stage of it all. But, this is another piece to that puzzle that you can add as well. So again, you do a lot of work in the community. What drives you to take on that passion to transfer that knowledge in the community itself?
Because if I don't do it, who's going to do it? That's the real answer. I look at a lot of the issues we have in the world and in the country and in my neighborhood and in my city. And I'm always like, what can I do? I can't take on all the issues that plague my community. So I choose the financial literacy one. There's so many people who've told me, well, pick your financial institution, throw out a name, right? They don't ever come here. We don't hear from them. We don't see them. They're not in my community. I have to go here to go get service. And you just keep hearing that over and over. And it's like, what could I do to help those people who feel excluded, who don't have the information, who feel financially illiterate? I got the info. If I don't do it, who's going to go do it? That's why I keep doing the work. And so I will sleep good every night as long as I keep doing this work, and I do it in the right way. I don't try to hard sell people. I know a little bit, and I would love to share it with you. Will you allow me to come talk? Like, share that information? If so, we can do some magical things if we keep working together as a community and as a collective. It fires me up when you hear the success stories of how you've changed somebody's life after one talk or two talks, or you shared a book or a program. You're like, man, I remember where I was when you first gave it to me. Wasn't close, but look at me now. And when you get those success stories, you're like, that's why I do the work. That's why I do it, because it's possible.
That's so important as well. It goes back to when I meet with clients, we've actually been in meetings with clients together, actually. And, one of the things that I always walk away with upon the conclusion of the consultation, and you hear me say this all the time, I feel good because you could never say you didn't know. And once you're able
Yes.
to walk away and end the meeting with, you can never say you didn't know, then I sleep well at night because I'm giving you the information. Now it's up
Mm,
to you to move forward with it. But if you can never go back and say, well, no one never told me that. Never
yes.
heard of that. Well, no, because we talked about it, we laid it out in great detail. But again, it goes back to learned helplessness in stage one, internal, external ecosystem, and things of that nature. And so that's why when you look at stage four, the inclusion is so important. I want to add as well, too, oftentimes people would ask me, so what's the most important stage on the model? And I would say, well, it depends on where you're at in terms of who you are, because each stage is equally as important. There isn't really one stage that's more important than others. But I will say this, that stage four, what you're speaking about, is critically important because you have to be able to take advantage of the resources, the knowledge, the information that is out there to even consider getting to stage five, which is financial well being, as you mentioned, your financial independence, so to speak. If you don't take advantage of stage four, it's going to be a challenge for you to get to stage five. You can't circumvent the model. You have to go through the process itself to get there. So, you mentioned your book. Could you give us like one or two of the questions that you ask within the book?
Yeah. One of the questions I ask is, do you commit to doing some form of a budget? And I say some form. And that's just you basically knowing, do you check to see where your money's going every month, every week, every 2 weeks? And it's just you either do it or you don't. Like you maybe do it sometimes. So I give you these continuums or ranges because how you manage and understand the inflows and outflows is part of this process. Another question I ask is about, do you have a monthly commitment to saving and investing every month? Do you do it? And at what rate? For a lot of people, they think getting rich and wealthy is like some sexy process. It's glamorous. It's not. It is slow and boring for most. The wealthiest people I know, it was slow and boring. There was no fanfare. There was nobody on Instagram cheering you on. It was just you were doing what you need to do to handle your business. And when you have that commitment to yourself and can remain disciplined, you'll have those riches and wealth and be able to create that legacy. Do you have a commitment to yourself to do that work? There's really no grade. It's either yes or no. And the yes could be you do $1. It's not about doing the millions today. It's I can only afford to do $2. Great. Do $2 until you can do $5. But if you have no commitment at all, it doesn't just happen automatically. You've got to do some work. But I think when we don't ask ourselves these questions, then we just kind of keep flailing. We are progressing in some regards in our life, but we feel lost when it comes to our money. And I'm sure you've heard this, man, I work hard, but I don't have much to show for it. There's a reason. There's a reason why you are working 50 million hours a week and you just don't feel like you've earned anything because you probably haven't taken the time just to look at the numbers. And I'm not telling people you got to do this all the time. Just if you did it one good time, the rest of it is maintenance. Like even with your model, it is when you get past the first couple of stages, yeah, you're going to revert back at some time because we're human. But it doesn't negate the fact that we've learned what we got to do to stay at this level. It's like credit. You can mess your credit up, fix it, mess it up, fix it, mess it up, and you can ride that roller coaster for the rest of your life. What if you just fixed your credit and maintained it? How about that? I swear to you, man, just people think this getting wealthy and rich is about these large upswings and downswings. It's like, what if we could just like have a nice little even, little small upticks, downticks? Doesn't have to be these roller coaster rides, but that's what I think marketing has done to us. It almost has made us believe that it has to be like this. The wealthiest people I know are the least flashy. Wealth is real quiet. If you don't know anybody wealthy, unless they are an entertainer, wealth is very quiet. Poor is flashy and rich is loud.
And on that note, it goes back to, again, we're taught that becoming rich is where we want to be because it's transactional. So final question for you. What key takeaways do you want our listeners and those who are tapping in for the first time to take away from this conversation that we've had this afternoon?
I want people to first believe that they can do better. Literally, the first thing, just believe you can do better. You are not out of this game until you go off to glory. Don't care where you're from, your education level, your job situation, family. If you believe you can do better, that is the very first step in this whole process. The second thing I'll say, and this is kind of like my way of reminding me that I got to keep doing what I'm doing, because I know we yearn and want more out of life, but we've got to do some work. And so I use this all the times. Actually, one of my key phrases that I use is actually on a t-shirt: work hard until expensive becomes cheap. And I say that because there are things you want to do right now in life that you're like, oh, it's just too expensive. What if it wasn't? And what are you willing to do to make sure that you can really live this fulfilling life and enjoy it and smile and go on these great trips and vacations and take care of the family? So yeah, we got to do some work. And the work, I would say, it isn't all on your shoulders, and it shouldn't be. And if you feel like you're that person who's working in a silo, or you feel like you're on an island, we got to get you out of that. We are all interdependent, and we need to get the help. You work with somebody like myself or Dr. Wallace, and you need a team. I talk about that money team. But if you keep working hard until expensive becomes cheap, I guarantee you, your blood pressure will be lower. Your stress levels will be lower. Life is still going to throw stuff at you, but you will be able to repel it a lot better when you have this plan built and you are focused. And if you can just believe that you can do this work, watch what happens.
So for our listeners out there, they wanted to schedule a consultation with you. What are the steps to get in contact with you, for one, and schedule a consultation?
I'll send everybody to the website. It's thebuildwealthmovement.com. So again, that's thebuildwealthmovement.com. And there's a contact us section at the bottom of the page. If anybody listening, tuning into this episode, would like a free 30-minute jam session with yours truly, just fill out the contact us section. You can put the name of this podcast, so I'll know where you got it from. You can put Dr. Wallace, just something to indicate that you were listening to this episode. I'll give you a complimentary half hour and see if I can be of service to you. And if not, I will gladly tell you I cannot help, and you will probably be served with another professional. And so I just know I'm very transparent and honest for people who do reach out. If I can't help, I will tell you right off the bat. If I feel like I can, I will offer you some different options on how I could help. Ultimately, it's still up to you to decide, are you going to hire me to be on your money team? And if not, I will do my best to serve you however I can.
Well, there it is, Future Wealth Builders. We'd like to thank Jasper Smith for coming on the New Wealth Wave podcast. On behalf of myself, my producer, Ray Haycraft, and all of our listeners out there, again, Jasper, great conversation, great information, great content as well. You've been outstanding talking about stage 4 of the generational wealth model. And Future Wealth Builders, always remember, generational wealth begins with generational knowledge. Until next time, I'll see you on the New Wealth Wave podcast.
Thank you for joining us on the New Wealth Wave podcast, hosted by Dr. Joaquin Wallace. Our show is edited and produced by Ray Haycraft. To dive deeper into the world of financial wisdom and learn how to create your financial footprints, head to our website at www.drjwallace.com. For more updates and exclusive content, connect with us on social media by searching Dr. Joaquin Wallace. And if you have questions and comments, feel free to email us at thenewwealthwavepodcast@gmail.com. Remember, generational wealth begins with generational knowledge. And as always, thanks for listening. The content presented in this podcast is strictly for educational purposes and should not be taken as investment advice. The views and opinions expressed by our guests may not necessarily reflect those of the New Wealth Wave podcast and its host or producers. Listeners are urged to exercise discretion and judgment before making any financial or investment decisions. Always consult with a financial professional or advisor before taking any action based on the content of this podcast. If you're enjoying the New Wealth Wave podcast, we appreciate if you leave us a review. We're always open to topic suggestions and guest recommendations. Feel free to reach out to us directly with your thoughts and feedback. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the New Wealth Wave podcast.